They say you can hear your own heartbeat echo off the concrete walls. No screams, no voices, just silence so heavy it starts to sound alive. This isn't a horror movie, it's a real place. Welcome to ADX Florence, the most isolated prison in America. If you're new here, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a like if you want more real-life stories that most people are too afraid to talk about. Once you're done watching, let me know in the comments. What would you do if this place was your home for the rest of your life? Now just imagine. You can hear your own heartbeat echoing off cold concrete walls. There are no screams, no voices, just a silence so thick it starts to feel alive. This isn't some scene from a horror movie. It's a real place, a real prison, a world built to bury men alive without ever killing them. Welcome to ADX Florence. They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies, a fortress of concrete and steel tucked away in the mountains of Colorado. From the outside, it almost looks peaceful. But what happens inside is another story entirely. This is where the United States keeps the prisoners it fears the most. Terrorists, spies, serial killers, and gang leaders. The men that no other prison in the country could control. The story of ADX Florence begins with blood. Back in 1983, inside the federal prison at Marion, Illinois, 2 correctional officers were murdered by inmates on the very same day. That single event changed everything. The federal government realized it needed something different, something stronger, a place that could never, ever lose control again. So, they designed a new kind of prison. A place where escape was impossible, where prisoners couldn't hurt staff or each other, and where even the air you breathe felt like it belonged to the government. After years of planning, the blueprints were finalized, and in 1995, the gates of ADX Florence swung open for the first time. Every wall, every door, every camera was designed with one single goal in mind: total control. The cells are made of solid, poured concrete. The doors can only be opened with electronic locks from a central control room. Tiny, slit-like windows let in just enough light to remind you the outside world still exists, but you can't see it. Inside these cells, there's no sound of footsteps, no chatter, no laughter. Just the constant, low hum of fluorescent lights and the faint, cold ring of metal. Each cell is about 7 by 12 feet. Inside, there's a concrete bed, a concrete desk, and a concrete stool, all molded into the structure. A sink and a toilet are combined into one unit. That's it. The furniture can't be moved. The walls never change. And the person inside, he doesn't leave, except for 1 hour a day. But that hour isn't freedom. It's spent in another concrete box, this one outdoors, surrounded by high walls and covered with metal mesh. They call it the dog run. An inmate can see a sliver of the sky, but never the horizon, never the mountains, never anything that resembles the outside world. The people sent here are often called the worst of the worst, and the list of names confirms it. We're talking about Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber; Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind behind the first World Trade Center bombing; Zacarias Moussaoui, connected to the 9/11 attacks; Richard Reed, the infamous shoe bomber. Each one is locked away, completely isolated from the world and, more importantly, from each other. From the outside, it sounds like a perfect, secure system. But step inside, and you start to feel something different. Former guards have described how the silence feels like it's pressing against your skin. Every sound echoes. Even your own breath feels too loud in the crushing quiet. Prisoners spend 23 hours a day inside their cells. Some go for years without touching another human being. Their meals are pushed through a small slot in the door. Their only conversations are with guards or psychologists through a small opening, and always under constant surveillance. Over time, this relentless silence changes people. Some prisoners stop talking completely. Others start talking to themselves, just to hear the sound of a voice. Some bang on the walls for hours until their hands bleed. Others try to hurt themselves, just to feel something, anything, real again. The government maintains that the system works. They argue it keeps the country safe and prevents the violence that plagues other prisons. And in a way, they're right. At ADX, there are no riots, no escapes, and no chaos. But there is a price for that control, and it's paid quietly day by day, inside those concrete walls. A few guards who work there have said that it's not the violence that breaks these men, it's the silence. You can see it in their eyes when you walk past the cell windows. Eyes that once looked sharp and dangerous now stare blankly into nothing. It's like the mind behind them is slowly, piece by piece, fading away. And here's a chilling fact. Once you go to ADX, you don't just serve time. You vanish. Even families find it almost impossible to maintain contact. Visits are extremely rare and conducted under strict, non-contact conditions. Every letter sent or received is monitored, with every word and sentence filtered and read by staff. Some prisoners have reported that after a few years, they start to lose all track of time. One described the experience as being buried alive. He said, "You don't know if it's day or night. You don't even know if you're still human anymore." It's easy to see how the system maintains control. But it's also easy to forget that these men, despite their crimes, are still human beings. They still think, they still feel, and they still dream. Amnesty International has called the conditions at ADX cruel and inhumane, arguing that some prisoners spend decades in this state of total isolation without ever being allowed real human contact. No handshake, no hug, not even eye contact with another inmate. And here's the truth that chills everyone who studies this place. Even the strongest, most resilient minds begin to break after enough time in total isolation. Some inmates start to hallucinate. Some forget how to speak. Some beg to be moved, even to death row, just for the chance to be around other people again. Yet, the gates stay shut. The silence stays thick. The system continues its work. There are stories of men pacing in perfect, tiny circles for hours on end, counting every single crack in the floor to keep from going insane. Others have memorized the patterns in the wall paint just to keep their minds active. A few write letters that will never get answers. A few even write to themselves. Outside, life moves on. The sun rises and sets, seasons change. But inside ADX, time stands still. And if you listen closely to the history of this place, you start to realize something truly haunting. ADX Florence was never built just to punish what these men did. It was built to erase who they were. Every door, every rule, every second of suffocating silence isn't just about security. It's about total control, not just over the body, but over the mind itself. And yet, the fundamental question remains. If you strip away every sound, every touch, every single sign of the outside world, do you still have a person? Or have you created something else entirely? No one really knows for sure, because the men inside can't tell us. And the world outside rarely thinks to ask. The desert wind keeps blowing across the concrete walls. The mountains stand silent guard. And deep inside that fortress, 1,000 heartbeats echo, unheard, unseen, and slowly, surely, fading into the silence. But the silence inside ADX doesn't just swallow time. It reshapes everything. In here, loneliness becomes a language. It teaches men to count cracks, to talk to shadows, to argue with memories that won't answer back. It's not the screams that haunt the guards, it's the quiet. Some of them say it feels like the building itself is alive, like the concrete listens. The men inside live a routine that never changes. They wake up at 6. They eat breakfast through a slot in the door. They sit. They think. They wait. Lunch comes hours later, then dinner. Every meal looks the same, tastes the same, feels the same. And every moment between them, silence. There's no cafeteria, no hallway chatter, no cellmate to argue with. Even when they exercise, it's alone, in what they call the empty yard, a small outdoor cage with a concrete floor and walls so high they hide the sky. The only way to tell time is to watch the shadow move across the wall. For some inmates, that hour outside becomes the only reason to wake up. One former prisoner said it wasn't freedom, but it was proof that the world still existed. He said, "If you stare at the sky long enough, you start to believe it's watching back." The rest of the day is spent inside that 7 by 12 foot box. Books are allowed sometimes. TV too, but limited and censored. They can't browse channels. They can't choose what to watch. Every sound they hear comes from behind glass and wires. And for some, the silence begins to whisper things. Guards report inmates talking to invisible people, arguing with themselves for hours, screaming into the walls just to hear an echo. Others stop responding altogether, sitting still for days, eyes open, mind somewhere else. It's called segmentation psychosis, a slow, quiet unraveling of the human mind. Psychologists who have studied these effects say that isolation doesn't just damage a person, it changes the brain itself. Memory weakens. Speech slows. The ability to control emotions fades away. And even when they're finally released, many can't adjust to normal life again. They avoid people. They flinch at sudden sounds. They crave silence, even though silence is what broke them. But the system wasn't built to heal. It was built to control. Inside ADX, everything follows rules, hundreds of them. Each door opens only when another closes. Every movement is timed, every sound recorded, every letter scanned. Even the shower is watched by camera. No step goes unseen. The technology that runs this place is precise, almost surgical. Sensors hidden in the floors detect movement. Lasers sweep the corridors. Every guard carries a device that tracks their position. Nothing, and no one, moves freely. The prison calls it safety. But to the men inside, it feels like disappearance. They are numbers now, locked behind steel, invisible to the outside world. And what makes ADX different from any other prison isn't just its walls. It's the silence between them. That silence has power. It punishes, it breaks, and for some, it transforms. Over the years, stories began to leak out. A few men managed to write letters describing what life really feels like inside. One wrote, "You can't sleep. You can't think. You just sit and wait for something that never comes." Another said, "It's like living inside your own funeral." Even former guards admit that working there changes you. Some say they had trouble sleeping, hearing phantom sounds of slamming doors in their dreams. Others left early, unable to bear the constant quiet. And yet, for all the horror, there's order. No riots. No chaos. The system works exactly how it was designed to. Silence as control. But outside the walls, the debate grows louder. Human rights groups have called the prison a clean version of hell. Lawyers describe it as psychological torture. Officials defend it, saying it's necessary for national safety. And somewhere in the middle of that argument, the men inside keep fading. Each day blends into the next. Each heartbeat echoes in the dark. And for those who have lived years like this, one question becomes impossible to ignore. When you've been alone this long, can you still remember what another voice sounds like? Some of them, when they finally leave, say the noise of the world feels too loud. That crowds make them panic. That conversations feel like chaos. One former inmate said the first time someone hugged him, he froze because he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. For those still inside, the world outside is only a memory. Seasons change, presidents come and go, technology evolves, but the cells stay the same. The concrete doesn't age. The silence doesn't fade. And the men, they slowly vanish, not by death, but by forgetting who they were. Some say ADX is proof that America can control even its most dangerous criminals. Others say it's proof of something darker, that even in a land of freedom, we can still find ways to cage the soul. But deep inside that fortress, behind all the cameras and walls, there's a truth that no report can fully explain. A truth that lives in the empty spaces. That silence is not just absence of sound, it's a presence. It fills every corner, seeps into every mind, and stays long after you leave. And as the years pass, the question grows heavier. If a man spends enough time in total isolation, surrounded only by concrete and shadows, does he remain the same person he was when he walked in? Or does the silence create something else entirely? Nobody knows, because the walls don't talk, the guards don't ask, and the men inside no longer remember how to answer. But sometimes, the silence breaks first. It starts small, a metal clang echoing down the hall, a shout that's quickly swallowed by the walls. Then nothing. Hours later, guards find blood on the floor. Not from a fight. There are no fights in ADX. From a man who couldn't take it anymore. Over the years, many have tried to end their own stories inside these cells. Some succeed. Others are stopped just in time. One man swallowed pieces of his own glasses. Another bit through his wrists. There are no weapons in ADX. Only time, and the human mind. In 2015, something rare happened. A group of inmates filed a lawsuit against the federal government. They claimed the prison's extreme isolation was destroying their mental health. Some of them were hearing voices. Others had stopped speaking altogether. Their lawyers said that men with serious mental illness were being kept in conditions that made them worse, not better. And for the first time, the world outside started to listen. The case exposed what was happening behind the polished image of the cleanest, most secure prison in America. The documents told stories of prisoners smearing words on the walls with blood, of men screaming for days, of guards turning up the radios just to drown out the sounds. Even a few correctional officers came forward, quietly, saying they were haunted by what they saw. One said, "It's like watching people disappear without dying." The lawsuit led to a settlement. The Bureau of Prisons promised reforms, more mental health checks, better treatment, new programs to help inmates adjust. But many say not much really changed. Because how do you fix a place that was built on silence? Some of the men who were there say the worst part isn't the loneliness. It's the endless sameness. Every day is a mirror of the one before. Wake, eat, wait, sleep, repeat. The walls never change, and after a while, neither do you. For those with strong minds, it becomes a battle of willpower. For others, it's like drowning slowly in air. Even the smallest details become lifelines: a fly buzzing through the vent, a guard who says, "Good morning," a letter that arrives once in a month. For a moment, they remind you that the world still exists. There are stories of men who spend hours training their minds, counting steps, reciting books from memory, making up conversations just to hear a human rhythm. But there are also those who lose the fight completely. Psychiatrists who studied former ADX inmates say many of them come out damaged beyond repair. Some can't handle noise anymore. Others flinch at sudden movements. Some talk to themselves in public, unable to stop. And then there are the names that make headlines. Men like Ramzi Youssef, the 1993 World Trade Center bomber; Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber; Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the cartel leader. All locked away inside the same fortress, each in their own concrete tomb. They never meet. They never speak. But their stories echo through those walls, like ghosts trapped in separate cages. Guards say that even walking through the corridors feels heavy, like the air remembers what these men have done. Yet, not everyone inside is a terrorist or a killer. Some ended up there because of what they knew, not just what they did. Whistleblowers, gang leaders who flipped, high-risk inmates too valuable or too dangerous to mix with others. ADX doesn't just hold criminals. It holds secrets. Behind every locked door is a story the world was never supposed to hear. And sometimes, those stories slip out. In letters, in lawsuits, in whispered phone calls. One inmate wrote, "They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies." But Alcatraz had windows. You could see the water. Here, you forget what the horizon looks like. He described how a man in a nearby cell would scream for hours every night. Not from pain, from fear. Then one day, the screaming stopped. The cell stayed empty for weeks. When new footsteps echoed down the hall, the guards didn't say where the other man had gone. They never do. The official reports say ADX is necessary to contain the worst of the worst. But those who have lived there say something different. They say it's not about control anymore. It's about erasing people so quietly that the world forgets they ever existed. And the world does forget. Each year, the population inside ADX shrinks, not because they're released, but because time does the job itself. The human mind can only handle so much silence before it starts to fade. Experts call it sensory deprivation. But inside, it feels like something deeper, like being buried alive, only slower. There's a hallway there, known as Range 13. It's the most secure part of the entire prison. Few have ever walked it. Even the guards describe it as unnerving. Each cell holding men who are considered too dangerous even for other Supermax inmates. Some say that when you walk through Range 13, you can feel the silence pressing against your chest. You can't hear footsteps, voices, or even breathing. Just a low hum of the air vents, like the building itself is sighing. It's where some of America's most feared men spend years, even decades, alone. One step out of line, and they're sent there. One violent outburst, one wrong word, and they disappear behind thicker glass, deeper walls, stronger doors. There's no way to tell day from night. The lights stay dim. The windows are slits, too small to see the sky. Even time itself begins to bend. Seconds stretch, hours collapse, and years disappear. And as you listen to their stories, you start to wonder, what really keeps them there? Is it the bars, the concrete, the guards, or the silence that holds them tighter than any chain ever could? Because the longer you stare into that silence, the more it starts to stare back. Some say ADX Florence isn't just a prison. It's a message that there are some people too dangerous, too unpredictable, too broken to ever walk among the rest of us again. But what happens when even the government starts questioning what it created? In 2012, after years of lawsuits, protests, and quiet investigations, officials finally admitted what many already suspected: the silence inside ADX had gone too far. Reports leaked showing that dozens of inmates suffered from severe mental illness, yet they were still being kept in total isolation. Some had begged for medical help, some wrote letters that were never sent, and some simply vanished into the system. It was supposed to be America's most secure prison. Instead, it had become a place where the mind itself was the enemy. Journalists who tried to get inside were denied access. Cameras weren't allowed. Even former employees refused to talk on record. What happens in ADX stays in ADX. The few who did speak used only one word to describe it: haunting. One guard, years after leaving, said he still couldn't sleep without hearing the echo of steel doors closing. "You start to realize," he said, "it's not the inmates who are trapped. It's everyone who works there too." Behind all the security and technology, behind the endless walls and motion sensors, something strange began to appear: cracks in the system. Reports showed that isolation wasn't just breaking prisoners. It was changing how guards behaved. Incidents of stress, depression, and anxiety among staff began to rise. Many left early. Some turned to alcohol. Others simply refused to talk about what they saw. It's said that if you spend enough time in silence, it starts to speak back. Maybe that's what was happening. The prison's design, the narrow windows, the soundproofed cells, the cameras everywhere, was meant to erase chaos. But instead, it erased connection. And without connection, people lose their shape. Inside, inmates started to find strange ways to remind themselves they were still alive. Some counted their heartbeats. Some scratched marks on the walls, creating calendars that never ended. Others wrote letters to no one, pages and pages of words that would never be read. And somewhere in the middle of all that emptiness, a few began to create sketches on envelopes, poems about light, stories about the sound of rain they could no longer hear. One prisoner said, "They can take everything away, but not what's inside my head. That's the only freedom left." But even freedom of thought has limits when you've spent years talking only to yourself. In 2017, after more pressure from human rights organizations, the Bureau of Prisons made another promise: that mentally ill inmates would no longer be held in solitary at ADX. They would be moved to a new facility with treatment and programs. And yet, reports years later suggest that isolation continues, only quieter, only deeper. Officials call it controlled housing. But inside, the doors, the lights, and the silence remain the same. The truth is, no one really knows how many men have lost their minds inside those walls. The Bureau doesn't publish the numbers. It doesn't need to, because the silence speaks for itself. Still, there are moments that break through. In 2021, a former inmate spoke publicly after serving over a decade in solitary. He said, "It wasn't the punishment that hurt the most. It was knowing the world moved on without me. I came out, and I didn't know how to live anymore." He couldn't handle crowds, couldn't sleep in the dark, couldn't look people in the eyes. He said his mind still felt like a cell, small, quiet, and cold. That's what ADX does. It doesn't just hold people. It keeps them long after they're gone. And as the debate continues over whether ADX is justice or cruelty, the prison stands untouched in the Colorado desert, surrounded by mountains, watched by towers, and wrapped in silence. The air there is dry, the sky wide, the walls unshakable. From the outside, it almost looks peaceful. But inside, there's a sound that never fades: the hum of ventilation, the heartbeat of steel, the whisper of lives disappearing. They call it the cleanest prison in America. But for those who've been there, it's something else entirely. A place where time doesn't move, where silence becomes a person's last companion. And maybe that's the true punishment. Not death, not pain, but the slow erosion of self. Because when a man spends years locked away from every sound, every voice, every face, he doesn't just lose the world loses him too. Maybe that's the real secret of ADX Florence. It's not about breaking bodies. It's about erasing presence until there's nothing left but walls and the silence they built. And somewhere, in that endless quiet, you can almost hear a whisper: is this justice or something else entirely? If you found this story eye-opening, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share this video so more people can uncover the truth behind the world U.S. most secretive prison? Drop a comment below. Do you think ADX Florence is necessary, or has it gone too far? Your voice matters. Let's keep the conversation alive.